Hey, what's going on, guys? It's yours for the most Arnold Toaster coming live here with Z Buckner. Say hi to people, Buck.
Hey, what's up? This is our third time trying to reboot this podcast.
Well, out of all the
this
podcasts
time it's
we've
gonna
done,
stick.
Yeah, out of all the podcasts we've done, that's probably like the fifth or sixth time.
But this time it's gonna stick though because
we're philosophers.
Yeah.
Because we're philosophers.
Yeah, because we're philosophers. We put a lot more thought into this format. Get it? You know, because it's philosophy.
True. You could say it's nothing but thought.
Yeah, they're right. So I mean, it's high effort. It takes a little too much effort, so we might get a little burned out. No, I'm just kidding. But we are well aware that we are notorious for not being able to stick with consistency when it comes to our podcast, and that is exactly why we're pivoting into philosophy. Okay, it is a very intentional decision.
That's right. No preparation needed. Just jump right in, and just we'll explain our deep, wise thoughts from our many years of experience.
Yeah.
All right.
So many years. We're getting kind of old.
We are. We really are. But hey, we've been through a lot in the few, I guess, in the many years that we've been here on Earth. We've had some deep and thought-provoking experiences, so we're going to put them to the test.
True.
Right. So this is episode 1 of Philosophy Topics. Buck and I will be discussing the meaning of life through various situations. Can range from talking about how small Earth is and the great vacuum of the ocean is space, or we could be talking about maybe politics if you guys get lucky, or we're talking about AI. But today, let me go ahead and introduce us. So, Buck, imagine waking up 10,000 years ago. No alarm clock, no emails, no traffic, just the sunrise, your little tribe, and the question of how you're going to find food today. Life back then was raw, immediate, and in many ways brutally simple. Fast forward to today, we live in climate-controlled homes, scroll endless feeds on glowing screens, and worry about things our ancestors could never imagine, like student loans, careers, political chaos, and artificial intelligence. So here is the question. How does our lives today differ from their lives back then? And is modern life truly better? In this episode, we're diving into what's been gained and what's been left behind as humanity has moved from survival in the wild to survival in the digital age. And along the way, we're going to ask, what do we really need to live a meaningful life?
I like it. You know, I imagine that our audiences are going to live much better lives after this podcast episode because we're going to enlighten them.
That's right, we are. We're gonna open their eyes to the truth of what our ancestors.
It's true.
Isn't it silly to think that our ancestors 10,000 years ago may have known better than we know today? Like more common sense, better way of life?
What makes you say that?
Listen, Buck. Today, in the modern world, we are constantly go, never stopping. But back then, just imagine every single night, no light pollution. You're all done with your hunting and gathering for the day. You're sitting next to a warm campfire. Your family is falling asleep, and you look up, and there are countless stars. And you just
what does that have to do with common sense?
Because
your claim was they had more common sense.
Oh, did I? I'll get there. Back then, you
had
so much time to think and ponder for yourself. Today, we are overwhelmed with the amount of information, but guess what? All of it is being told to us. None of it is coming directly from inside ourselves.
True. We consume. We don't create.
Yes, we consume whatever information we're being given. We may translate it or place it on paper ourselves, but ultimately, we're not coming up with the stuff that we learn. We are just getting it from somewhere else. How do we know that information is correct? How do we know that that's what's best for us? Back then, people made their own destinies. Today, we just do as we're told.
True. You got a point there.
Yeah, anyway, that's my thought. But the reason this topic came up for me was because I was at the National, what is it? Utah Museum of Natural History, I think is the name. I was at that a few weeks ago. I was just walking through looking at all the like arrowheads or really old shoes or little tools that people used to use. And funny thing is, 10,000 years ago, it may seem like a long time, but in terms of evolution, they were basically how we are today. Like, they had the same size brains almost exactly. So,
really?
I mean, probably the biggest difference was language, because I'm assuming language wasn't as developed by then. But other than that, I think that they were just like us, just lacking the technology that we have today.
Is that museum the one with the big like T-Rex on the side of the building, like Thanksgiving Point?
No, there's no T-Rex outside,
No.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a good point. I think I like what you brought up with the stars, because you and I, the most stars I've ever seen in my life, you were there. It was when we went up to the hot springs. And then we got out of the car and we could see like everything because we were in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea that there were that many stars in the sky. Like if I would have guessed, like it would have been like half of those. It's like, and that wasn't even like the darkest spot we could get to. You know, it was pretty good. But I think it's a good metaphor for like, you know, what else are we missing? You know what I mean? Like not just stars, but like is our vision flawed because of all the, you know, the things we have at our like disposal today, readily available, and it kind of cuts us off from other things that might be harder to get now, as opposed to some of our ancestors might have, you know, might have been easier to make connections or things like that. That's where my mind goes when you mention stars.
Sure. I mean, it was like that every single night for them. They didn't have a phone to turn to or a TV screen to turn on. Like every single night,
right,
when you were winding down for the day, you were either hanging out with family and friends, or you were just looking up in the sky and thinking about life. And back then, they didn't even know what stars were. Isn't that just crazy to think about?
True.
What do you think was going through their heads
That's
as they
true.
looked up at the sky and saw all these little lights and the moon? I mean, I can't imagine what they were thinking, because today we know what all of it is, but back then they probably related it more to religion, or because they didn't know what else it could be. They're like, hey, there's this giant light in the sky, nobody can reach it.
Oh, true.
Must be a god or something.
True, yeah. Yeah, it was like that for a lot of things. I don't know if it's true, but there's that story about, like, what was it, Columbus or something, when he went to, like, Cuba. There was, like, a solar eclipse, and he used it to convince them that it was God who was, like, angry at him or something like that. I'm not sure if that's a myth, but it wouldn't surprise me if, like, you know, when they saw solar eclipses back then, they probably thought the world was ending.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
But is more knowledge really, is it freeing, or is it does it shackle us?
That's a good question.
Does it kill our imagination?
Well,
because like I said, we are consumers now. We are not. We don't create as much as we used to, I feel like.
Yeah, well, I guess we could look at our own lives instead of looking at humanity as a whole compared to the past. We could look at ourselves now, back to when we were kids. Like, do I feel more free now than as a kid? Well, I would say in certain ways, yeah. Like, you know, I could drive a car, I have money to do things, I can do whatever I like with my free time. But at the same time, I also feel more restricted, because back when I was a kid, you know, maybe I could be Superman when I was older, Or maybe I could
True.
go find a dinosaur. Or I could use my imagination to make my own little world, you know? It seems like as I've gotten older, as reality has set in, like in reality I've been given more freedom, but everything that I used to have has been diminished.
Yeah, it's true. You want to know another insight I just thought of? Stephen Fry, I remember he was talking about one of his books, and he says one of the things we've really lost over the centuries and the millennia is like sitting around telling stories, like by the campfire. Like you and I went to Scouts together. We kind of know like the appeal to that, you know? It's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of, I don't want to use the word intimacy. That sounds like a euphemism or something, but like it's more like now when we consume, people are like, oh, if we're consuming more, that means we're creating more because we have to consume something. Well, the problem there is that's not true, because the things we are consuming are mass produced. You know, the things we eat, the things we watch, viral videos. You know, how often do you watch someone on YouTube who has like no subscribers, right? Every once in a while, but I feel like most people are watching things that are viral. They're mass produced, they're produced for the masses. And so we're not as creative on that scale, and because of that we've lost the idea of like sitting together one-on-one and having more direct connections, I feel like. So it's not that things are online, but things are just kind of disconnected in the sense that, you know, they're not personal, and they're not, you know, if I sit down with you and tell you a story, it's just you and me. Nobody else hears that story unless I choose to go tell someone else. Whereas if I tell the story on YouTube and millions of people see it, I think it kind of loses its authenticity, and it's not as special, I guess. I guess you could see it that way. That's probably debatable, but
no, that makes a lot of sense. Like back then, if you had a good story, you know, you'd tell your friends, and people would be like, "Man, that's an awesome story.
Right.
Tell me more about that." But these days, you just post on the internet, and something that once was special just kind of blends in with the rest of the millions of stories out there.
Right.
It's hard to make something unique when everything is already available at your hands. So
that's true.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's true. If it's also harder to impress people, you know what I mean? If I told a really cool story, like the odds of someone never having heard it before, even if it was told, you know, maybe the story has been told like similar, but that would be somewhere totally different and nobody's heard it before. So telling stories was like cool and whatnot. And I don't think it's like lost. I think it's still that way. I just don't think we talk to each other much anymore, you know? Yeah. So that's tough. It's not as intentional. It's more chasing clout, you know, or views or money or what have you, instead of just doing it just to do it. So.
Right, for sure. I got a few fun facts for you, Buck, about these people 10,000 years ago. We're gonna read off some of them.
Ooh,
we're gonna see how it
facts.
compares to our life today. Okay.
Okay.
So first of all, hunter-gatherers 10,000 years ago seemed, or it's hypothesized, that they only worked around 4 to 6 hours a day finding food, compared to our modern 8 to 10 hour work days.
You said 6 hours a day?
4 to 6 hours a day.
Yeah, that would have been about my guess, like 4 hours, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a switch off. There's pros and cons, because back then, yeah, like once you find food, especially if it's a lot of meat, then, you know, you're set for a few days. You don't have to worry. But at the same time, you know, a bad work day back then meant that you could go hungry. A bad work day now usually just means like you get yelled at by your boss. So there's definitely a trade-off there.
You're right. It's true. Yeah, at some point we got to start going into what's good about the modern era, because not everything is worse, right? But that's totally true. I've heard the argument a lot that like humanity wasn't meant, and I'm careful to say that. It's like meant by what, you know? It's like, what does that even mean? But like human body wasn't meant to work 8 hours a day, 5 hours, or sorry, 5 days a week, and whatnot, right? And moreover, the human body wasn't meant to like sit at a desk for that amount of time. You know, we're supposed to be active creatures, or at least that's where we were as a society before. Well, people were a lot more active.
Yeah. Nah.
I think.
Oh
I could be
no,
wrong.
I mean, definitely. I just read a book called The Anxious Generation. It goes over why Gen Z in particular is so anxious compared to like boomers and the silent generation and things. And one thing that
I've heard that's a good book.
It was super good. Highly recommend it. One thing that the author emphasized on was that recess time, like playtime for children, is super vital to their social and intelligence capacity. But over time, as the years go on, kids have actually been losing more and more recess because schools keep emphasizing higher test scores instead. So, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, kids would get a 15-minute recess at the beginning of the day, 30 minutes during lunch, then another 15-minute later. Well, the author was saying that as time goes on, that's just decreased more and more and more. And because of that, a lot of kids aren't getting the playtime that they need. And that is causing a huge, not just for the anxious aspect, but it's also really hurting their intelligence and their ability to grow. And I think that we can kind of compare that to us as adults, right? Of course, we don't go playing on playgrounds anymore. But if every single day we're working 8 or 10 hours, driving home for an hour in traffic, watching a movie, it's like, are any of those things truly giving our minds the opportunity to explore or to play? Because it's all pretty repetitive most of the time, and a lot of it isn't growing in the ways that we need to grow.
Yeah, that's good insight. I loved recess as a kid, and not just because it was fun to play, but because it broke up the monotony. I think that's a big thing for me, at least. That was big. Yeah. And chance to socialize. I think whether kids are social or not has to do a lot with their development, if you ask me as well. And I guess that's big into like I'm sure the anxiety book goes into that a lot as well.
Yeah, no, it was a great book. Totally recommend it.
Yeah, that's cool. Make a review. I heard Mr. Toast here is going to start getting into reviews on his YouTube channel. Movie reviews, book reviews. I heard that somewhere. Is that true?
My YouTube channel is free to be whatever the viewers want it to be. It's all up to my subscribers.
Yeah.
I'm a people pleaser.
That's what I'm talking about.
If my subscribers want reviews, just let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to do them.
That's awesome.
All right, here's another not so fun fact for you. So, it's commonly known that the average life expectancy 10,000 years ago was much lower than today, 30 to 35 years, but not for the reasons that people usually expect. The mortality was dragged down because of the high infant mortality rate. If you survive childhood, you could often live to over 60 years old.
Huh. Okay.
So, I know that, like, I don't think it's a rumor. I think it's true. But however you go into old pioneer houses, all the doors are, like, a lot lower than today because apparently people were shorter back then.
No, I've never heard that before, but I guess it makes sense.
Well, anyway, I think it is pretty well known that, and obvious that as time has gone on, technology has advanced in medicine. Humans have been able to live longer and longer, but that is pretty sad to think about. Like, back then, infants just, like, died like crazy because if they got a little bit sick, or if you didn't have enough food, or if they ran off and got lost. That's really sad to think about. Children today are definitely a lot safer than they were back then, so that's a big upside.
True. That is a big upside, safety. And, people can argue, and they should, like, on like privacy when it comes to like tracking phones and whatnot and what have you. But there's always going to be that kind of there's that debate's never going to go away when it comes to like surveillance and getting safer. But overall, like these things are great, you know, like being able to keep track of where your kids are. It's a lot easier, or it's a lot safer just in general for kids. I agree totally.
Yeah, so, I mean, when you're comparing all of the pros and cons, like, I would have to say that that's one of the largest pros, of course, is... I mean, can you imagine, especially, like, being a husband, you have a wife, she gets pregnant, and then something terrible happens, like, she dies during childbirth, and you lose the child, too? I mean, I can't imagine. Yeah. My wife and I were talking about that a few days ago, because we were like, hey, we still know there are some people in the U.S. today who have births at home just because, like, 95% of the time you can have a baby at home and it'll just be fine. You know, you won't have medications to numb you or anything. But then you think about those 5% of cases where something does go wrong, like you need to have a hospital right there, you need to have doctors nearby, because there's just too much on the line.
Yep.
All right. Another fun fact for you. Ancient humans woke up with the sun and slept with the natural rhythms of light. Artificial light has shifted our sleep cycles dramatically.
I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
My girlfriend, her sleep schedule is terrible, and it's because she works night shift. Like, it's really hard for her to, I mean, not to mention, like, you know, other people are up and about and that wakes her up, you know, when she should be sleeping. But just the fact that she doesn't wake up with the sun, like, our bodies just aren't meant to do that. And that makes me wonder, like, you know, did they sleep more during the winter? I guess that would make sense if they did back then.
Yeah, I would assume humans did at least somewhat of a hibernation during wintertime. You know, less movement, a lot more sleep. Just because when the sun is down almost constantly and it's freezing out, I'm assuming that they just kind of huddled together and try to wait until spring.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely get my sleep schedule mixed up a lot. But that is really interesting to think about. Like, can you imagine it being wintertime right now and just going off of nothing but the sun, like waking up around 9 o'clock in the morning and then going back to sleep at like 5 or 6? That would be...
You know, I'm shocked that some people are really good with not sleeping a lot and waking up really early, going to bed late. I wonder if it's just something you get used to. You know, I heard some people can live pretty well off like 6 hours of sleep. I could never. But yeah, I don't know.
I know that you know this because you used to have the app, if you don't still, but a big part of sleep is when you wake up. Like, if you wake up right in the middle of sleeping, you know, when you're deep sleep, then you're going to be really groggy for most of the day. But if you only get 5 hours of sleep, but you wake up at the perfect time, right in between your REM cycles, then you could actually feel really refreshed and be just fine.
Right.
So those apps definitely come in handy.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I wonder if like it was easier for them to sleep in colder environments back then, because they didn't, and vice versa in warmer environments, because like you said, they don't have like any sort of way to control climate other than fires and you know, that's about it. So was it easier for them? Because I feel like nowadays they say that it's hard for you to sleep if you're not within, your body temperature isn't within like a 5-degree range, like it's really small. And that's hard to do because a lot of the world is like really hot or really cold. It's, you know, it's not uncommon to be in an environment that's one of the extremes.
Right. Yeah, I think
so.
I think back, I look at especially deer in the wintertime. Like, I'll see a deer walking around when it's snowing and freezing cold and windy, and I just think, like, how the heck do wildlife survive winter every single year? Yeah, how do bugs survive winter? I don't
True,
I don't
yeah.
really understand it. But I guess at the same time, I think about myself in summer right now. It's been 95 degrees for the past month, and now when I go outside, like, yeah, it's hot, but it doesn't feel nearly as hot as it was when it went from like 70 degrees to 90 degrees. You know, I'm pretty used to it by now. So maybe it's the same thing with them back then.
Yeah.
Maybe after a while,
It's weird.
You're like, hey, every day it's freezing cold, but you just kind of get used to it.
It's weird, yeah. When we went to school, it was like really cold. Well, I definitely got used to it. Like, it was still cold, but like it didn't bug me much. And the same with the heat. Like, in some areas of the world, like when I was living in California, like 100-degree day, like, believe it or not, wasn't that bad. Like, I could stand it. But like if it gets 100 degrees here in Washington for just a couple weeks of the year, it's like death. Right?
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, I have a cat. And I just went out to see her today. It's 100 degrees. I think it's the hottest day of the year. And just got me thinking, it's like, it doesn't seem to bother her. Like, you know, I don't know how these cats, she's an outdoor cat. It's like, how do the cold temperatures and then extreme temperatures they don't seem to be, you know, to be bothered by it. And, you know, were we like that at one point? Why are humans so, like, I guess, picky? Why are we so, like, you know, they have to be a perfect temperature? And yeah, like if we were to stay outside all the time, would we get used to that? Probably. I would think so.
Yeah.
Not to say that heat exhaustion doesn't exist or whatever, but like, I think to an extent our bodies kind of get used to, you know, controlled environments and whatnot. So then we become wimps. We get soft.
No, for sure. I mean, back then, same thing with feet probably. Like today, we're wearing shoes everywhere we go. Well, back then, depending on how far you go back, like sometimes they had no shoes or shoes made of nothing but a thin layer of wool or whatever, and maybe some straw in it. I mean, back then, you probably
think of the hobbits. You think hobbits hurt their feet walking around all day? Nah.
No.
No.
See it in the movies, it doesn't affect them one bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So back then, people were probably much more resilient than we are today. Not just mentally, but physically, because of that.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Probably by a long shot too. It's not even marginal.
All right, I got one more fun fact for us, and then we can go back to some of the questions that we had. And this goes back to something that you said. So the fun fact is, instead of TikTok or Netflix, ancient humans likely spent evenings telling oral stories around a fire, the earliest form of shared entertainment. And that gets me thinking, do you think that back then younger generations would look up to older generations way more than they do today?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think so, yeah. I think just in general, like, elderly people are not respected as much nowadays, for better or worse. I think that's partly because everyone's so opinionated, or if they're not more opinionated, it's easier to spread your opinion. So it feels like there's more opinions out there, and that will inevitably cause like clashing, because it seems like you don't respect someone who you don't agree with, just in general. And there was less of that back then. So I'm not sure if that's why, but that's a really good question. I feel like it's true. You probably respected your elders a lot more, and like your ancestors and whatnot.
Yeah, I know that it differs according to cultures in the world today, because in Asia, I know the elders are still very much respected.
True.
But,
that is very true.
But I think especially with the internet in the early 2000s, it's like before that you had to read a book, or, you know, since the 70s, maybe watch TV. But most of the time, older people knew more. And that was just kind of a fact of life, because more experience, more time on Earth.
Yeah.
But now, or at least a few years ago, before older people really knew how to use the internet, kids might look up to older people and say, hey, these guys don't even know how to use a keyboard and a mouse, but here I am.
Okay,
I have Google
there
at
you
my
go. Yeah,
fingertips, and I can look anything up in the world. So I think that's another big reason
that's
why
good.
elders have lost.
I think you just, yeah, I think you just found the answer. I think it's because nowadays, technology, and not just technology, but just everything in general, is just advancing so rapidly. And so every generation is completely, like, their experiences are completely different, you know, whether that be economy or tech or science or education, even. Like, I mean, even just between me and my little brother, who's like 12 years younger, 13 years younger, or something like that. Like, the things he's learning in school, completely different than what I learned, like, completely. And there's a huge divide in just so many things. And so it's not that, like, you look down on that, but I think that just, you know, when I look at my grandparents, it's like, your life was totally different than mine. So, yeah, not why should I listen to you, you know, but you take it more with a grain of salt. Whereas back then, chances are your grandpa's life was a lot similar to yours. So, yeah, I think that's a really good insight.
No, for sure. Like, that last part's a really good point. I'm sure maybe all the way up until like the 1900s, if you were to talk to your grandpa and ask him what he did as a kid, he would probably say, oh, you know, I threw rocks around, built forts, run through the fields. And you'd be like, hey, that's what I do. I'm kind of like Grandpa. But nowadays, we look to our grandparents or great grandparents, and we're like, man, like, these guys didn't even have color TV. It's just so different than what we're going through.
Right.
And
yeah, and it's been advancing, you know, like, quicker and quicker and quicker. Because even in the 1800s, like, it wasn't that fast, but, you know, you had the abolishment of slavery, and you started getting, like, light bulbs, and then later on you got cars in the early 20th century. So things were, like, advancing, and now it's like, you know, every 10 years, you know, all you have to do is go back 20 years and there was no iPhone, which is crazy to think about, but 20 years isn't that long of a time when you talk about generation, right? That's just like one generation. So
right. Yeah, I hate to be the typical older person who says that the younger generation is messed up, but maybe that's one reason why we do feel like the younger generations have been messed up these past few years, is because for thousands and thousands of years, older people could advise younger people on what to do in certain situations. But nowadays, you know, with the problems that youth are going through, a lot of adults don't know how to deal with those things because they've never been through it. You know, maybe you're being bullied online, or you want to get more followers on Instagram, whatever it may be. Like, older people have no advice for you. You got to look to your other younger peers. And a lot of the time, social media influencers who are trying to give you that advice are not the best examples to follow by.
Yeah, it's the old stereotype where, you know, you ask your grandpa, like, how do I get a job? Or even your dad, you know, your parents, how do I get a job? And they're like, you put on a tie, you walk into the store, and you shake them, you look them in the eye, you shake their hand firmly, and you say, I want a job. And you look, you know, you look respectable, and that's all it takes. It's like, nope, that is not how it works.
And that's an inside joke between Buck and I, because both of our dads told us that exact sentence. It's hilarious, it's hilarious how similar those two are.
Yeah, it's very, very true. That, I think we just cracked the biggest code. Like, things are just advancing so much now that I feel bad for, like, all the kids, you know. They gotta, like, it's like a game of catch up. Like, how do you evolve? How do you adapt so quickly to, you know, if you have to learn things that you didn't even have to learn 30 years ago? Like, that's a lot to ask of a kid. How do you even teach that? How do teachers teach something that, you know, didn't exist 30 years ago? They can. It's just a lot harder, and it's a lot more accelerated. So I gotta imagine we're gonna hit a wall at some point. You know, one of these generations is just gonna be too much. It's like, It's too much.
we will.
Can we do it?
We'll hit that wall when AI takes over and destroys humanity. But that's for another episode, of course.
True. We could do an AI episode. Yeah. It's scary, man. I've never thought about it this much. You're kind of freaking me out.
Hey, this is what. Just think about the viewers and listeners. We're helping them think too, Buck. We got to take the hit for them. We got to take the bullet.
Yep.
All right. Do you think earlier humans were happier than we are today, Buck?
Yes. I don't think it by like a huge amount, but yes. I think we're lonelier nowadays for reasons we've already mentioned. I think that we are more prone to kind of just be fed rather than feed ourselves. And I'm not talking literally, I'm talking like when it comes to everything, nowadays, if you have a question, you just look it up on ChatGPT. Everybody does it. Whereas before, you kind of had to do your research. You had to figure it out yourself. And there's something to that, once you learn, if I learn to cook on my own, it's probably a lot better as opposed to me just looking up on ChatGPT, how do I do this? And then doing it, whether you do it right or not. Like, you didn't learn as much because, it was kind of handed to you in a way. So, yeah. And then there's also, I feel like people there's a lot of pressure on a lot of kids nowadays because, like we said, they can't come to their grandparents or parents for advice as much. So it's more on them to kind of figure things out. So yeah, it's probably a lot of things, but overall, I would say we're not as happy as we were before. And I don't know if you're comparing to are you talking to 100 years ago, or are we talking 2,000 years ago?
Either way. I think you made some good points.
Yeah, I guess either way.
I'm sure you've heard the saying that once you have kids, or maybe even just get married, you get higher highs and lower lows. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Oh. Well, the point is that...
Just because of responsibility?
Yeah, just the responsibility or experiences you go through. I can say right now that from being married and having a kid, I know it's typical of people to say this, but I never knew I could love this much. You ever hear your mom say that?
Yeah.
She's like, I never thought I could love you guys this much. Maybe I'm asking.
That sounds bad, but
okay, maybe I'm asking the wrong questions here. But the point is, I'm sure back then it was probably the same way, where you could experience more happiness, but you could also experience a lot more sadness. And maybe today we don't have quite the range of emotions that they did back then because we don't go through as much. And I would say that today we're more content with how life is than they were, but they probably were happier than we are today. That's my thought.
That's true. That's a good way of putting it, because one of the traps you can fall into when you're talking about stuff like this is we don't mean to sound ungrateful. There's so many things that we haven't really got into how modern life is better yet, and I think we should, but we don't mean to sound like, oh, everything sucks and everything should go back to the way it was. We're very lucky to live in a time where we can live with air conditioning and a roof over our heads, and we can go to the store and buy things. Not mentioning how much they cost, but things are all readily available. You can get basically anything you want nowadays, at least in first world country, and that's another topic on its own. But I think the difference between being content and being happy is very smart, because we can be content in a lot of things. We can have all of our needs met, right? We don't have to worry about survival as much nowadays. But that doesn't mean we're happy necessarily, because happiness hinges on a lot of things. Do we have relationships? Do we have hobbies? Are we meeting our goals? Or do we want to, are we becoming everything we want to be? I think it's arguable that stuff is harder nowadays.
Yeah. No, and we definitely should give a shout out to the modern age, because overall things are definitely better. if you were to ask me, like, hey, would you rather live in modern times with your family or go back 10,000 years? Of course I'm going to say modern times. Things are safer.
Right.
I would say more simple and just overall better. But the point of this podcast is thinking, okay, yeah, like overall things are better, but how has our view of the world changed? How has the human psychology changed? Things may be better in some ways, but are we actually better off than we used to be? So those are good points, though.
Yeah.
We are definitely living in better times, and in no way do I want to discount how spoiled we are compared to basically every other generation that has ever lived throughout human history, because we're probably in like 0.1% of all humans that have ever lived or something.
Yeah. True. Yep.
Okay. How did small, tightly knit tribes compare to today's massive, globalized societies in terms of belonging?
Ooh. I'll let you take that one first.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about, because back then, especially something like 10,000 years ago, you probably were within your very small local community. And then outside of that, like, let's stop talking about what the stars are. How do people even know what's on the other side of a mountain at that point, How would people back then know how many humans were on Earth? They had no idea. They had no clue. They had no idea if on the other side of that mountain there was a giant civilization that could kill them or just another small tribe. And today, we have the number of humans on Earth almost down to the number. We know everything about every single society, every single culture, every single civilization that has lived back thousands of years. So that is very interesting to think that back then, you didn't know any other humans except for maybe the 20 or 30 people within your immediate group for almost your entire life.
Okay. And the question is belonging, you said? Like a sense of belonging?
Yeah, I mean, we can make the question whatever we want it to be, but it was asking, how did small, tightly knit tribes compare to today's massive globalized societies in terms of belonging? And is loneliness a uniquely modern epidemic?
I think it's easy to feel lonelier now because it's almost like, you think, do we feel more that we belong because we know that there's more people and whatnot? I feel like it's the opposite. If you've got a tighter knit group, you're gonna get closer relationships with that group because that's all you have. I'm not sure that's true though, but yeah, I feel like religion has gotten bigger over time, in the sense of like how many people are religious, but back in like 2,000 years ago, people were more devoutly religious. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Like religion was everything. Like empires. You basically point to every war or every empire in history, and the vast majority of all of them were because of some sort of religion or other, and that was their lives, and people belonged to that, and that was their identity. So I think we've kind of lost identity over time, and not that it's directly tied to religion, but I think it's a good case study to look at. People are more kind of individualistic now, for better or worse. So, and that can lead to loneliness.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll definitely cover this topic more in a future episode on religion, but maybe a month ago, I read a book called The End of Faith by Sam Hyde. Do you know who Sam Hyde is?
No.
Okay, maybe it's Sam Harris. Sam Harris or Sam Hyde? Let me look it up really quick. I'm sorry, Sam Harris, not Sam Hyde. Anyway, but he went through that a lot, how, like, especially, throughout all of history, and even today in the Middle East, like, most of human deaths throughout history have been due to like religious wars or just people disagreeing on morals,
On religion, yeah.
on religion.
On morals, yeah.
So
Yeah, it doesn't shock me one bit.
yeah, so we'll definitely be covering that in a soon to be episode. What else was it?
Yeah, it's a hard question to put a definitive answer. Like, is there a better sense of belonging now? I honestly hold the sense that we are lonelier now than we've ever been in history, despite knowing our place in the universe. I mean, we don't know our place in the universe, but you know what I mean, like scientifically. So I guess maybe that's the answer to the question, I guess, people stuck within their own kind of spaces back then, but at the same time, they knew they were a part of something, right? Part of an empire, part of a small tribe, part of a religion. Nowadays, I feel like if people do that, it's either religion, yeah, but it's also like nationality. I'm from this place. But it's not nearly like it was back then. From what I would guess, back then, is it a big deal that you're from this place or that place? Maybe if like during wars or whatever. But nowadays, I mean, there's a lot of talk now that I think about it. It's like, I'm from, like, where are you from? I'm from here. Oh, what's that place like? This. Not sure. Has it always been like that? Who knows? Yeah. That's kind of like, that's the first thing you ask someone, if you're in a place, and like Disneyland, if you're in a place where there's generally a lot of people, what's the first thing you want to know about a stranger? Oh, where are you from? What's that place like? So
yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point. I think a big part of it is how much you rely on other people, because today, even if you don't have many close friends, you could still rely on the government, you could still rely on social media or forums on Reddit or whatever to ask for advice, ask for opinions, ask for help. But back then, the only people you could rely on were those immediately in your circle, right? Those in your vicinity. So maybe that's another reason why we're feeling more lonely today, is because back then, whenever you needed help, like you had to ask somebody for it, and usually it'd be those same people over and over and over. And you know what happens when you ask someone for help? Your connection strengthens a little bit. They start feeling like they can ask you for help, and then you two become more tightly entwined in your relationship. So maybe that's another big reason why relationships today aren't quite as tight as they were back then. It's just because back then you had no other choice. You had to rely on your friends and your family to cover your back, or else you could get killed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also begs the question, do we trust people more nowadays? I'm not sure that's true, because back in the day, kingdoms were kingdoms. If you weren't from my land, which I guess contradicts what I just said about like people's identity not being from places. So maybe I'm wrong there, but like, people didn't trust each other back then for the smallest reasons. So that's interesting. But I have a question for you. I was just thinking while you were talking, making your excellent points. What do you think expectation has to do with it? Because I'm thinking that nowadays we expect a lot more of not just people around us, but ourselves. Like, we hold ourselves to much higher standards because of the possibilities of the internet and everything. It's like, man, if it's that easy to make connections, and if it's that easy to find like a spouse, like, why is it not happening to me? Like, do you think that's a factor?
I'd say so. I mean, back then,
do you think there's a distorted? Do you think it's distorted in accessibility?
Yeah, I'd say so, just because back then life was so much simpler that your main goals were to find water, find food, find shelter, maybe a companion. But these days, our goals,
Yeah.
what we aspire to be, are so much higher. We want to be successful.
Yeah,
We want
way
a big
higher.
house. We want a nice car. We want to be in an area that's safe for our families. Back then we didn't have all those different options. I don't think anyone even thought about those sorts of things. So nowadays, knowing that those are options and they're within our reach, I mean, I could definitely see us having higher aspirations for ourselves. And if you see
Yeah.
somebody who doesn't have aspirations like that, then yeah, we probably judge a lot more than they did back then.
That's true. People are a lot more judgmental now for the same reasons, yeah. But I never thought about that until now. It's like we expect so much of ourselves. And for me, that's actually one of my biggest flaws. Like I am so like what's the word? Like what's the word I'm looking for here? I expect so much
You're
of
a critic?
myself.
Self-criticism?
Yeah, self-criticism. Yeah, I'm such a self-critic. And in that, like, if I'm not doing good, like on a weekly basis, like I really like it really affects my mood. I've really noticed that about myself as of late. And they're like, I think about it, and it's like super unrealistic standards, like you didn't make this much money this month, and it's like an outrageous amount, or like you've got this goal, and it's like a 5-year goal. You want to be here in 5 years, and you didn't make any progress towards that this week, and because of that, you're going to be depressed for like 2 hours. It's like, it's absurd. But we expect so much of ourselves because it's so easy to see what everybody else is doing, and not just everybody else, but it's easy to see like the most successful people, because those are the people that are put on your front page on like Reddit and Twitter and everything. You only see the people who are really successful, the big YouTubers and the CEOs and everything.
Yeah.
And right, and that becomes your reality. It's like you forget that they're one in a million, so you hold yourself to a huge standard, and it's depressing if you don't really like rein yourself back.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Not that you should settle for less, but yeah.
No, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. We're constantly looking at people on our screens or reading about them, and they're all successful. We never, maybe in fiction sometimes we'll see someone who fails, but usually it's these billionaires or celebrities or social media influencers, and so we feel like we're not doing good enough whenever we compare ourselves to them. So that's a great point. Tying into that a little bit, I wonder if part of the reason that seems to happen is because we feel like we can control more than back then, so that's why we blame ourselves more. I'm wondering if back then, 10,000 years ago, if you couldn't find food that day, then what more could you really have done? But these days, we have so many options at our fingertips. Maybe that's why we sit in our bed and we think to ourselves, well, I guess that's the question.
Maybe it's an illusion. Maybe it's an illusion of control. Maybe we're meant to think we have more control. But, in reality, I mean, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure the options are more available to us, especially considering people 2,000 years ago, like absolutely. But I think we like to think there's more options than there really are, maybe sometimes. And that's why we hold ourselves to such a high standard, because we look at like, people with, Elon Musk has got $400 billion. It's like, well, if he can do it, somebody else can too. And, that's such an outrageous standard, right? Like, is that really totally in your control? Like, probably not, but you can't help but dream. You can't help but wonder. And I remember even when we were kids and social media was just getting big, like, Facebook and whatnot. I remember the big talking point was like young women seeing these, the effect it would have on young women constantly seeing like models with like these really unrealistic bodies. And, what does that do to children? And what does that do to development and self-image? And I guess the way we've been talking about it is really just the same, just on a bunch of different levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember
So
reading that. I can't remember the time frame. I'm just gonna guess. Maybe 50 years ago, the average onset age for puberty for females was like 14 or 15, and nowadays it's way lower. It's like 11 or 12, and it's because of that reason. So interesting. All right, we
yeah,
are. Sorry, go ahead.
I just said wow.
So we are nearing the 1 hour mark. So I do have one last question for us to discuss, unless there's anything that you would like to bring up. Of course, it doesn't have to be exactly on the dot of 1 hour. But philosophy, a huge topic that is discussed is death, the end of our lives.
Ooh.
So my question is, how do we view death today compared to how they viewed death back then?
I would argue there's little difference. I mean, science hasn't done much to explain it. And, people have always been religious, and that's always been a thing, and that hasn't really changed much. So, I don't know. I would argue not much has changed.
Yeah. My thought process is going back to the mortality rate. Back then, you could die much more easily. Like nowadays, you might die when you're older of a heart attack or younger because of something like a car crash. But back then, even back to like the 1800s, you knew a lot of people who died young. A lot of your friends or family.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like these days, we don't think death is likely or sometimes even possible until we're old. We don't expect death to happen. But back then, they might have thought like, hey, there's 10 people in our group. 3 of us are probably going to be dead within the next few years. I wonder if that closeness to death affected how they looked at it compared to today. Because for me, it seems really way off for myself. It seems really far off for the people I know. So I don't think about it quite as much as maybe they did back then.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think about death quite a lot nowadays, I'll be honest with you. I didn't, like in college, but time like goes by so fast now, and it like kind of freaks me out. So, but it's true, like death was much more of a uncertainty then, I guess would be the word for it. You never knew. And nowadays with like medical advances, even if I have a heart attack, it's not certain death because of medicine and care. So maybe life was a lot more precious to them, or more appreciated, not precious, more appreciated to them back then. I've never thought of that, but could very well have been the case.
Yeah, thinking about that infant mortality rate, what if your family had like 3 kids and all of them survived childhood? Then I guess that family would be like super appreciative. Nowadays, it's expected, of course, but that's a good point.
That's a good point.
I would say that it would be accurate to say that life back then was more precious. They probably were just way more cautious about death and just like grateful to be alive, I think.
That opens a whole can of worms, though. Does that mean like for them war was worse? Like if they, as soldiers, like was war more serious than it was to us, like than it is to us now? Like man, I've never thought about that. Like back in like the Vikings days when it was like, death was glory, and I guess that's a religious thing, right? So that's different, but I guess medieval times, if you were a soldier and you're going off to war, was that way much more of a thing then as it is now to get like drafted? Like is it way scarier just because the chances of safety and medicine and recovery and health and all that is like, it's not a guarantee. It's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I guess it could go both ways. Maybe back then you saw so much death that it wasn't quite big of a deal. You're like, hey, I'm going off to war, I'm probably going to die, but so are half the people going to war with me, so like maybe it's not maybe it's not quite a big deal as it would be today. It's good questions. Good thought.
Scary
questions.
Yeah. We could go into, but it'd be a whole can of worms, is like forms of government and how they have to play on like human psyche and morale, and were people happier under kings versus like the average country today. And obviously that sounds cut and dry, but I think that might be worth a discussion at some point. It's just a big one.
No, that'd be great. I've always wanted to discuss, especially like a republic democracy versus a true democracy, because it doesn't seem like a huge difference, but I bet in the results and actions, I bet they're huge. So I definitely like to discuss that at some point.
Yeah, we could do an episode on like politics over time.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right. Well, awesome. Well, Buck, I want to thank you for being my co-host today. I think that was a very lively and thought-provoking conversation. And I want to thank the listeners for listening in.
Thank you guys.
What's a question that we can leave the viewers with to have them ponder? I guess just think about what life for yourself would have been like 10,000 years ago compared to today. Like, how does that make you re-examine your own life? Do you think you'd be happier? Do you think you want to be as happy? Are you more grateful to be in the modern times? Just take that home with you guys today. And
that's a good question. I would say if you could take one thing from 1,000 years, well, let's say 2,000 years ago, let's say, I guess the Greeks were farther back than that, but you know what I mean. If you could take one thing from the olden times and bring it into the modern age, what would it be and why?
That is a good question. All right, we'll leave you guys with that. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, share. Go check our sponsors, Skittles, at skittles.com. Code TOAST in Buck for 0% off. Thanks for watching, and
That's right.
Catch you guys in the next philosophy episode, hopefully next week.
Bye-bye.